Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is speaking about Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. What is this supply chain threat? We are all living in a globalized world. Goods that are manufactured in some other country will be reaching some other country. In the present scenario, China is the manufacturing hub. It is the exporting hub. It is also a center where maximum number of goods are manufactured and it is exported to multiple countries in and around the world. But there could be an unanticipated event. This can be in the form of natural one or it can be a man-made one. If it is a natural one, let's say for example, the volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, earthquakes or even a pandemic, what would happen? Since China is a manufacturing hub, it would not be able to export the key products to other countries in the world. It can also be a man-made issue as well. This can be in the form of armed conflict or it can be a riot as well. Let's take a simple example. We have the Hong Kong issue. Let's say key manufacturing hubs are in Hong Kong. If there is an issue, we have seen couple of times because of democracy and imposition of the Chinese rule, there have been certain revolutions in the region of Hong Kong. So what is happening? There is a man-made issue in the form of armed conflict against the Chinese central authority. So what can happen? In case Hong Kong is a region which is a manufacturing hub, this can also result in supply chain issues. Or let's take some other examples as well. Let's take the example of what happened in 1990s and 1991. Because of issues in West Asia, India was not able to get the oil. This also resulted in oil crunch in India. This was also a man-made issue. So all those issues which prevent a country from getting certain goods from another country is what is called as supply chain threat. This is the actual meaning of it. Now, in order to overcome this issue, what we have is the supply chain resilience. So, what is the supply chain resilience? Instead of focusing on one single country, instead of getting our products and goods from a single country, what we actually do is we diversify our sources. Let's say, for example, with reference to the Indian defense sector, we do not focus only on Russia. Initially, India did focus on importing maximum number of goods from Russia, but India did learn its lessons as well. So what does India do? India does import its imports of defense mechanisms and its products and equipments from multiple other countries. It can be Israel, it can be United States of America, it can be France, or it can be any other country which it is comfortable with and it can trust its sources. So what is happening right now? Instead of resourcing all the products or any other defense products, or it can be the oil as well, what we actually do, we are not relying on a single country, but instead we are diversifying our sources. Such a move is what is called as supply chain resilience. In the present scenario, because China happens to be a manufacturing hub, because we did also see some issues because of goods not reaching the countries, Japan has come up with an initiative that is what is called as supply chain resilience initiative. This has been taken up by Japan. It has also asked countries like India and Australia to be part of this initiative. So what is this supply chain resilience initiative initiated by Japan? This is basically diversifying the sources apart from China. When you look at certain statistics, Japan and China already have a very good economic and trade relationship. Japan exported $135 billion worth of goods to China in 2019. It also imported $169 billion worth from the world's second largest economy, accounting for about 24% of its total imports. Electrical and electronic gear, machinery, nuclear reactors, boilers were sectors that clocked up significant imports into Japan. Japan is also another country which also exports manufacturing products as well. That can be in the form of cars, it can be in the form of mobile phones, or they are very good at robotics. So what they require is electrical and electronic gear. They may also require machinery as well. If China is the manufacturing hub and it is exporting all these products to Japan, and during the pandemic like COVID-19 or any other natural disaster or a man-made disaster strikes, China would not be able to serve all the products to Japan. It is at this particular juncture we need an alternative route or an alternative country which is able to supply these important products to Japan. That is why Japanese government has also told all those manufacturing companies which are originally from Japan but they are currently operating in China to come back and operate in a different country. They have raised an amount of about 2.2 billion to incentivize all its company which are originally from Japan. So this is not a protectionist stance. When it is a protectionist stance, it basically means it is asking a company to come back to Japan and only operate in Japan. But what is Japan doing? It is not asking them to come only to Japan, but instead don't work only in China, but also diversify the sources, work in Indonesia, work in Vietnam, work in India, work in Australia is what is this incentivization policy all about. So in the near future, when there is a problem that China is not able to supply because of its political issues, because of its economic issues, or because of intentional issues of geopolitics, that is when Japan or any other country does not suffer. Why? Because they have diversified their sources right now. India, that is why, has also diversified its sources when it comes to the defense imports. That is why India also gets its oil imports from Iran, it gets it from West Asia, it gets it from Saudi Arabia, it also gets it from Nigeria as well. This is what is diversification and this is what is supply chain resilience, not relying on a single country or a company when it comes to the company affairs. Now, why is that Japan has invited India as well as Australia? Let's look at that particular point. Japan is the fourth largest investor in India with a cumulative foreign direct investments touching 33.5 billion in 2000 to 2020 period, accounting for 7.2% of inflows in that period. Imports from Japan to India doubled over 12 years to about 12.8 billion in the financial year 19. Exports from India to the world's third largest economy stood at 4.9 billion in the same financial year 19. And as we discussed yesterday, India and Japan have a very fruitful relationship. They are also part of Quad, they are also part of Malabar exercise, and they have been investing jointly in Africa, in Maldives, in Sri Lanka, and they have a very good relationship both in economic terms as well as in geopolitical terms as well. We did also speak about Indo-Pacific initiative. So Japan right now wants India to be part of this initiative. Now you might ask me a question. Why is Australia requested to be part of this initiative? That is because Japan and Australia and India are already part of this Quad movement as well. And at the same time, Australia currently also has some issues with China. Why? Because China was the source of the country which gave the world the gift of COVID-19. Had they taken all the due measures, COVID-19 would have not spread. That is why Australia also wanted to see if the origins of this particular COVID-19 virus was in China. So what did they do? They, along with United States of America, wanted to check whether the source of this particular virus was in China, or was it an intentional move, or it was unintentional. So they wanted to have a framework and realize where exactly, what exactly happened with respect to COVID-19. The minute this was initiated, China became infuriated with the actions of Australia. So what do? They started breaking certain relationship with Australia, in fact even issuing threats as well. What are those? Some of this include beef imports were restricted or in fact reduced when it comes to Australia and China. And when it comes to the further actions initiated by China, they have also levied import tariffs on the Australian barley, and all those students who are in China who were planning to go and study in Australia, they also started issuing warnings as well. So they said that in case you're aspiring to study in Australia or you're already studying in Australia, be careful. Why? Because there is racism in Australia and this could be a threat to the Chinese students, say the Chinese government. Then there were citizens who were also planning to go to Australia as well. Why? That is because of the tourism sector. And now the Chinese Cultural Ministry issues a notification. This notification was clearly about not going to Australia. Such was the moves initiated by the Chinese government against Australia. Therefore, Japan wants India and Australia to be a part of this process, which is speaking about resilience when it comes to the economics. And at the same time, India also will have to make sure that in the near future, most of these products are not imported, especially when it comes to the electronic goods. And what we require is either make in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat. So, to make India an Atmanirbhar Bharat or self reliant India, what we require is the skill set. What we require is ease of doing business. The license raj, the permit raj has to be eliminated. So what is the due process that India has to initiate? During this particular process, India will have to make sure that its skill set with respect to its demographic dividend is enhanced, and all those issues with respect to its business, that is the ease of doing business, is also increased with respect to India, so that India need not have to depend on the outside countries, is what this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the Pulwama terrorist attack, and this was initiated by a terrorist organization called as Jaish-e-Mohammed. In this particular backdrop, let's understand what is this terrorist organization, what is its ideology, what should be the role of Pakistan in the near future, and what are the steps that should be initiated by the government of India. When it comes to this terrorist organization, this is a Pakistani based terrorist organization working on terrorist activities in support of Pakistan's ISI. So who is giving license to it? Indirectly, it is the Pakistan's ISI which is also supporting this terrorist organization. It draws its ideology from the Pakistan based Deobandi school of thought Harkat ul Ansar, which is known for its guerrilla tactics in Afghanistan, and the same pattern is also present in the Jaish-e-Mohammed and its sources from Harkat ul Ansar. It has carried out several attacks primarily in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, back then, now a union territory. The group is responsible for several terror attacks: 2001 Indian Parliament attack, 2016 Pathankot airbase attack, and 2019 Pulwama terror attack. And after this 2019 Pulwama attack, India being a strong state, India having one of the largest army, air force and navy, will not hold back. So what does India do? India immediately strikes all the terror training centers of this Jaish-e-Mohammed in Balakot in Pakistan by the Indian Air Force, where airstrikes were conducted by India. After India attacked this terror training center in Pakistan, Pakistan also retaliated. After this period, there was a thaw in relationship between India and Pakistan. There was freeze of relationship. All the diplomatic ties between India and Pakistan resulted in a freeze, and they did not have any talks after this period. While all this was happening, the National Investigation Authority from India was investigating who was behind this dastardly attack. The National Investigation Authority has now filed a charge sheet on the Jaish-e-Mohammed outfit headed by Masood Azhar and 19 others for planning and carrying out this dastardly attack on the Indian soldiers. This NIA charge sheet clearly gives us an idea how Jaish-e-Mohammed is directly involved in this crime, who were the handlers who were appointed by the Jaish-e-Mohammed, how it was executed in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, and how this was being planned since the year 2016. When you look at its operations, you will understand the training might be given by the Jaish-e-Mohammed. All the secrets, the reconnaissance might be given by the Jaish-e-Mohammed, and we also have the training and infuriating those people with fundamentalist thought might again be taken up by the Jaish-e-Mohammed. But this will also require high intensity explosives. This will also require some of the equipment which the terrorist organizations might not be able to procure. So what we see indirectly is this push or this encouragement was also given by the Pakistani authorities. So what we have is Jaish-e-Mohammed conducting all these activities, and we also have the support that it is Azhar, and along with him it is 19 others involved in this particular case. So what should Pakistan do in the near future? Pakistan has been trying to establish relationship with India and is also wanting to talk with India and continue with its diplomatic relationship. For Pakistan to continue its relationship, and has Imran Khan been claiming that he wants a peaceful relationship with India and also wants to reform the deep state, he has to bring a meaningful change. So he has to make sure that all the perpetrators of crime, that with respect to the Jaish-e-Mohammed, will have to be brought under the law books. That is an initiative that should be taken by the Pakistani government. And India will also have to look inwards as well. Why inwards? That is because there are few students, there are few local militants who are currently present in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, who are taking their arms against the state of India. This means there is radicalization of thoughts which make them go against the state of India. So identifying who these people are, why are they getting radicalized, and taking up de-radicalization measures is the first thing that the government will also have to take up. Apart from that, we also downgraded the state of Jammu and Kashmir to the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. This means certain autonomy is taken away. Is it a right decision or not should also be taken up by the government of India. So what is the way forward? The way forward is, apart from making sure that there is security and diplomatic measures and pressures that which we put up on Pakistan, we also have to look inwards and bring about massive changes when it comes to the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, preventing the radicalization process in few people who are taking up their arms against the state is what this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Israel and Palestine issue. What are we going to discuss under this article? We will focus on how Israel as a country was created. We will understand what have been the disputes between these two countries, and we will focus on outstanding issues between Israel as well as Palestine. First, we have to understand how Israel as a country was created. When we go back to the early 19th century and even prior to that, what we actually see is respect of this Jewish community was completely stripped off. Why? Whether they were in Russia, whether they were in Germany or in major parts of Europe, these people were killed, they were butchered, their respect was stripped off, and they were also put in gas chambers, and many Jewish community were persecuted and they lost their lives as well. So because they have been losing their lives in all the European countries, they decided that they require one home of their own where the entire Jewish community will come over and they can stay in that particular place, their home, what they call so, in a place where there is no butchering, and this will be an independent country of their own. So what do? The persecuted Jewish community from the Europe start moving towards their home of Jerusalem. This is not their actual home, but they start moving towards Jerusalem. That is because of the historical context with respect to the birth of the religion. So they start moving towards the Jerusalem. Then what happens? Jewish community is also known for its prosperity. Why? Because they are into economics, they are into politics, they are also the trading community in United States of America. They started funding this particular movement, and all these Jewish community people start entering this very region of Jerusalem. This is where the concentration of the Ottoman Empire was also present. This was also a time where the British Empire was waging a war against the Ottoman Empire. So this was during the World War I. So during the World War I, the British Empire seek the help of the Jewish community. Why? Because they wanted to make sure that the Ottoman Empire is completely destroyed and this particular power entity is neutralized, and British take all the power in the Ottoman Empire. So they seek the help of the Jewish community, and they also say that in case the Jewish community does help us, we will give the home for the Jews called as the Israel. And that is an important argument put forward by the British Empire. And such a declaration is what is called as the Balfour Declaration, where Arthur Balfour wrote a letter to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. So what was this Balfour Declaration? This was made by the British Empire in the year 1917. What did they say? In case the Jews are supporting us against the Ottoman Empire, we would have a natural home established for the Jews in the Palestine. This is the Balfour Declaration, which was marked in the year 1970, and in 2017 it became 100 years since this declaration was given by the British Empire. After the war, Palestine became the part of the British Empire. Why? That was because the Ottoman Empire was conquered and this was under the control of the British Empire. Then many years passed on, and then what we have is the World War II. What happens after the World War II? What we see is all those countries which were once under the control of the colonial powers were getting independence. We can take the example of India, we can take the example of East Asian countries and couple of countries in Africa as well. So after the World War II, this happened in West Asia as well. The United Nations immediately comes up with a proposal with respect to the West Asia, especially in focus to Palestine. So what does the United Nations say? It says that Palestine in this particular area will be divided into three areas. What are these areas? There will be an independent Palestine, we will also have an independent Israel, and we will also have an international Jerusalem as well. This will be a region which is a major cultural significant area. Why? Because this has given birth to Christianity, this has given birth to Judaism, and it is also one of those regions where Islam was also created as well. So this will become a cultural significant point, but we will have an independent Palestine as well as independent Israel. This was accepted by Israel as a country, but this was not accepted by the Arab countries where Palestine was supposed to be created. So what happens? Britain start withdrawing themselves and the country of Israel is born, and ultimately, since the Arab countries do not want the establishment of Israel as a country, there is a war that immediately takes up. So what is this war? That is the first Arab-Israeli war. Why? Because the Arab countries did not want this country of Israel to be created. So after this, the war was over, and then the Arab forces lost the war, and Israel had captured 23% more territories than what was originally said by the United Nations partition plan. And this is where the first Arab-Israeli war ends up. How? The Arab countries lost and Israel gained more territories than what was originally given by the United Nations. Until 1967, all the countries were supporting the very cause of Palestine. But after 1967, there was a condition where Arab countries were not so serious when it comes to the cause of Palestine. So the weakening of the Arab collective voice allowed the Palestinians to take the front when it comes to the conflict. So until 1967, all the countries, Arab countries, came up together, supported the cause of the Palestine. But after 1967, you had Palestine itself taking the front seat in fighting for an independent Palestine. Then what happens? We have the origination or the creation of the Palestine Liberation Organization. This was headed by a person called as Yasser Arafat. He was operating from Jordan initially. Why was he operating from Jordan? Because he wanted to make sure that Israel as a country was out and there is only country of Palestine. So he was operating from Jordan, but then this was not long enough. Why? Because King Hussein of Jordan immediately releases the armed forces and they neutralize this particular force of Palestine Liberation Organization. So they had to find a new home. That is when they head to Lebanon as well. So what was once an operating principle in Jordan, they now head to Lebanon. This is where Israel realizes that this Palestine Liberation Organization will not let us live peacefully. So what do? They go on to Lebanon and also make sure that they are eliminated from this particular place as well. Finally, the PLO moves to the region of Tunis as well. After Yasser Arafat goes to Tunis, he also gives a call for uprising. So all those Arab community people living in the state of Palestine now raise against Israel. They also go against Israel as well. So Israel realizes that status quo cannot be maintained after this. So what it results in what is called as Oslo Accord. What is this Oslo Accord? This was signed between Mahmoud Abbas and the Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin of Israel in 1993. While all this was happening, they were trying to mutually recognize Israel as a country and Palestine, and they also wanted to recognize and provide a provincial government for the Palestine. Something else happened. That was the assassination of Rabin in the year 1995. So the Oslo talks, which was supposed to be initiated, which was supposed to be executed, and recognition of Palestinian Authority was to be implemented, what we see is the death or assassination of the Prime Minister of Israel. And as a result, this two-state solution ultimately was not implemented. This results in number of initiatives taken by the United States of America under the presidency of Bill Clinton. Then we also have the Saudi Arabia taking the initiatives as well. Then we also have one of the initiatives taken by United States of America, United Nations, EU, as well as Russia. All these initiatives that were taken by multiple people, multiple countries, was ultimately unsuccessful, and today we still have the issues between Israel as well as Palestine. So what are the outstanding issues? One is with respect to the boundary issue. The Palestinians and the Arab countries say a Palestinian state should be formed based on the 1967 border. As we initially discussed, Israel has conquered deep into the Palestine, and they have also built security walls, and they do not want to go back with respect to the West Bank or with respect to the Gaza as well. The second issue is with respect to the capital. The Palestinians see East Jerusalem as their future capital, but the entire city has been controlled by the Israeli occupation. So what we also see is that both these powers, Israel as well as Palestine, want Jerusalem as their capital, and both of them are not mutually accepting for each other's recognition. Third, we have the issue of refugees. The first Arabi-Israeli war has led to displacement and exodus of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, which they call Nakba, or what is called as catastrophe. All these Palestinians who were present in their home after the first Arab-Israeli war were asked to move, and they became the refugees in their own land. And now Israel has not even given the recognition to these people, and ultimately this is created a refugee status in their own place is one such argument. So what is the way forward? We need the peace process being established. All the major powers will have to come. United States of America and many other powers will have to make sure that there is a two-state solution and peace is established in this very region, is what this article all about. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Bhargavi River flows through the state of, is it West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, or Tamil Nadu? The answer to this is Odisha. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Kindly remember, we have the Bhargavi River which flows through the state of Odisha, and this happens to be a branch of Mahanadi River. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following items are kept outside the purview of GST? Electricity, aviation turbine fuel, alcohol for human consumption. The answer to this is 1, 2, and 3. All the three are outside the purview of GST. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Because we are speaking about the GST issues between the central government and the state government in the past 2 days, we have taken up this practice question. Now let's look into the next practice question. Parambiculam Tiger Reserve is located in the state of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, or Goa. The answer to this is Kerala. Now let's look into the next practice question. Arrange the following hills from north to south. Palgonda Hills, Chevroy Hills, Javadi Hills, and Palani Hills. The answer to this is 1, 3, 2, and 4. Why have we taken both these practice questions? Because of the reference given under this article. So we have Palgonda on top, followed by Javadi, then Chevroy, and finally what we have is the Palani from north to the south. This article here further speaks about butterflies which migrate in the southern part of India. Usually what happens is we have the butterfly migration in southern part of India which begins in October and November. But this time it is early, says the article. So with the onset of the northeast monsoon, they move from the eastern Ghats, that is from the plains, to the Ghats, that is in the western Ghats. And during the April-June, just before the advance of the southwind monsoon, they move from the western Ghats to the Eastern Ghats region into the plain region is what this migration all about. But we also have to know the significance of butterflies. Butterflies are crucial pollinators and they also contribute to the global agriculture and is valued very next to the honeybees. So when it comes to the pollination, the butterflies take a very significant position when it comes to the contribution of agriculture. But these butterflies have also been seeing threats as well. That is because of the habitat destruction and deterioration when it comes to their habitat. Then there is widespread use of herbicides and pesticides which has exacerbated the problem, and ultimately there is illegal trade of butterflies as well, which is resulting in drop of the butterfly population. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to African baobab. It is known as the tree of life as it can live for over 1,000 years. It yields fodder, medicinal compounds and many such products. Which of the above statements are correct? It is asking for a correct statement. So the answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Kindly remember, there was a recent study in scientific reports which says that the tree has about 168 chromosomes, and this study will be useful in genetic conservation efforts as well. There is another festival called as the Mandu festival. This is a world famous picture queue tourist destination located in Dar district in Madhya Pradesh. This is a town peppered with UNESCO heritage structure as well as African baobabs. So kindly remember, it can be important for your preliminary examination. Now let's look into the next practice question. What could be the main reasons for the formation of African and Eurasian desert bed? It is located in the subtropical high pressure cells. It is under the influence of warm ocean currents. Which of the statements given above is correct in this context? The answer to this is one only. Why? Because this is not the warm ocean currents. Instead, it is the cold ocean currents. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Beijing's aggressive political and military behavior has demanded the creation of a supply chain resilience initiative. Elaborate. Explain the role of Britain in the creation of Israel. Discuss the outstanding issues between Israel and Palestine. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and also come up with constructive criticism. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.